morning, everyone, and welcome to the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners 20th Budget Work Session. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. That includes myself. For those presenting today, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking and off when you've completed your remarks. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. So I'm going to walk us through the agenda a little bit today. We have until noon today. We have a lot of things to cover. We're going to start off with Christian giving us a few updates on department amendments. We're going to then walk through the miscellaneous amendments that we did not get a chance to cover last week. We're going to move into a pretrial, the pretrial amendment and some of the proposals around pretrial. And then assuming we have time, we're going to start digging into the budget notes. And so we have a lot of documentation. Thank you, Budget Office, for that. So with that, I will turn it over to Christian.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Christian Elkin, County Budget Director. I use she, her pronouns. We have two updates that we've been hinting at. I don't think you'll be surprised by any of these in the department amendments. And so I do have department professionals here to speak to them specifically, but I just want to walk through these two. These will be included in the attachment A department amendments when we get to those on Thursday, but wanted to make sure that we daylighted them before then. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So we have the Department of County Human Services, their new budget amendment. Next slide. And they are adding $4.25 million in eviction prevention funding from the City of Portland. These are, I believe, one-time only dollars. This was also, there's going to be a companion bud mod coming on June 11th to add the additional $750,000 for the current fiscal year, for fiscal year 2026. So a total of $5 million is coming. $750,000 in fiscal year 2026, $4.25 million in fiscal year 2027, and that supports 1,000 households with eviction prevention dollars, and the department is here to discuss any details because I understand the top line, but nothing below that. So if we have any questions, we'll go ahead and take those now. you can, well, this. Yeah, so this amendment will add that to the eviction prevention program.
Just want to shout out Councilor Avalos for getting this across the finish line and Councilor Smith for getting it over to us.
Yeah, very exciting. And again, we'll talk about this again on June 11th. It'll be a quick bud mod, I'm assuming, at that time. If we can go to the next slide, please. We have the Homeless Services Department has one updated budget amendment. Next slide. Oh, that data is wrong on there. I hate when I see errors when it comes up on the screen. So this is a revenue amendment for the Homeless Services Department. This is pass-through funding coming from the state of Oregon. We are the fiduciary in this process, so that funding has to come through Multnomah County. It will be passed through. It's just under $2.8 million, and that is being allocated and earmarked for the City of Portland shelters. If there's any questions about that, but we technically are the fiduciary, so it will come through us, and then we will pass it directly through to the City of Portland for their shelter support.
Well, yes. Any questions about this one? There was a lot of conversation between my staff and the state on the intent of these dollars, how they should be directed. I think this is part of a pot of money that they're dispersing to follow up on investments that the state had already done to shelters. The dollars that the state had given to Multnomah County for shelter operations was for a shelter that we had closed, the Greyhound station, and so these dollars are kind of following up on an investment the state had previously made for some of the Portland shelters. Okay.
Well, fine.
I hear you. Yes. All right. Thank you, Christian. Is that it?
That's it for me now. I'm sure I'll see you later this afternoon at some point. Oh, yeah. If we want to walk through really quickly, sorry, there is a lot of papers. So I have reprinted for you the budget amendments as of May 28th. and with all of the sponsorships and the changes here. So that is your big sheet of paper, and for those following along online, this is also posted on our website at multco.us/budget, fiscal year 2027. This should contain everything to date that we have. If you look at the final page, you'll see that we are still out of balance, and so working towards that as we get towards Thursday. The other package that, the big thick package is the supplemental package to these amendments, which contains both the commissioner's amendments as written and then along with the impact statements following each amendment. Except for the revenue amendments, we did not write impact statements for those. That was purposeful. So those are contained in this package. This package is also online and people have access to it. And then finally, just the reminder, these were documents that we handed out to emailed to you last week, but I want to make sure you had a printed copy. And it's basically just 2 working documents to help us get towards balancing the budget. The first one is showing where we are using duplicate offsets so that we know, because we can't use them twice, obviously. And then the other sheet shows us where we're using revenue amendments in more than one area, because again, we can't use them more than one time. So we just wanted to make sure that you all had access to that as you're thinking through how we're going to balance the budget on Thursday.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Any questions for Christian before we let her return to her seat? She'll be close by in case we're needed, in case she's needed. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go ahead then and move on to the miscellaneous category of amendments. That is going to be amendments 11, 16B, 6, 18, 8B, 3B, 13B, 21, and 33. So just so folks playing along at home can know. All right, so the first one is 11, which is from Commissioner Brim Edwards and others and Commissioner Moyer for loan fur. So, and this is adds $1 million in one-time general fund capital funds to the FY27 budget for loan fur, and the pay for is the vector control relocation project. We had some conversation from DCA last week about the vector control project and the timeline of that and kind of the needs of that money and the what's happening with the city of Portland's in terms of that project. Any other questions or discussion about this?
No, I'd just add that when we gathered at the Lone Fir Cemetery about a month ago, the county made its public its formal apology, which was, decades in the coming. And last year we had a budget note that said we'd prioritize in the budget process the county allocation that had been requested. And so this amendment keeps our promise and our commitment.
That's all? Okay. Just to share, I did have conversations with some folks at Metro to ask what happens if we don't allocate dollars to this project, and it sounds like they would look at other projects that were funded with the same bond that went out that they're using for the majority of the funds for the Loan Fur project, and looking at seeing potential savings across other projects to help fund any gap that there might be. I mean, that's just kind of a casual conversation, because I wanted to know what happens if. I'm not sure, that doesn't mean that they would make it fully whole. It's just that's what the alternative could potentially be.
Again, from my perspective, the apology was one piece, and then the action following that was the completed funding, and there was no indication either when we issued our formal apology or any of the discussions that it wouldn't be funded in this year's budget. So I'm hoping we adopt this.
Okay, great. Any other comments on this one? Okay. We have 16B, which is ADA ramps. And so 16B is, again, taking from vector control, $750,000 and putting it into a one-time only general fund allocation for ADA ramp development. So I had asked the DCOO's office to do a little work on seeing what potential alternatives there are, and found some information. Commissioner Moore, I don't know if you want to speak to that. Okay.
If all happens correctly, I will be amending this, I'll be amending this amendment to clearly lay out that $1.75 million of our capital construction projects will specifically be for the cost of ADA ramps, and then an additional $250,000 from our transportation contingency will specifically be spent on ADA ramp projects that are not part of bigger projects, bringing our yearly commitment to ADA ramps to $2 million. So that is the plan if that comes together. And I will return the $750,000 to vector control.
Just one question I had, and this may have to come as follow-up. It's for the department. ODOT just shared last night their summer construction plan, and there was a big package around ADA ramps, and I wasn't sure if we had looked at it and any opportunities to leverage investments, or if there's other summer projects that we can leverage into ODOT summer projects that we can leverage to expand our ADA ramps. I don't need it now if you don't know, but it's fine. I just want to put it out there.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. So we'll have DCS follow up on that one. Okay, great. Okay, any other questions on Amendment 16B? Okay, great. We have Amendment 6 from Commissioner Brim Edwards, Animal Services.
This is one that hasn't changed. I think maybe my only one that hasn't changed throughout the process. The amendment's budget neutral. It restores $170,000 in one FTE represented position to the animal enrichment program at the animal shelter. And I think this precedes the majority of the commission, but there was a county audit that by the auditor that looked at animal services. Frankly, there was several. And one of the recommendations was around animal enrichment, that animal enrichment improves the health and the well-being of animals in our care. And that, so this is a result of an audit recommendation from several years ago. And the pay for is one FTE in the Spark unit that's currently vacant. And this goes to my comments the other day in that when we look across some of the really hard choices that we're making this year in the budget, there is, I feel, a disproportionate impact on direct services versus at the very top of the county. So this is just an offset that takes one vacant position out of this Department of County Management and the COO's office.
Okay.
Also, I should note that it's been suggested that volunteers could replace the work of this individual. And while I think for anybody who's been out to the animal shelter, you can see there are so many volunteers who show up every day to support the work of our staff. But it's really not possible to replace, to say that volunteers will replace the work of the staff person.
Okay, so we have, the pay for is from the Department of County Management, COO's office. We did hear from CO Neal last week about some of these impacts to the COO's office and the projects that they're responsible for. Any other questions for either DCS on this or for the COO?
Yeah, I'm supportive of the amendment, just not the offset, because this is one of the positions that we agreed, that I advocated for last year. So as far as the continuous improvement, it's a specific skill set. So I'm curious, Mr. Neal, if there are other options for the offsets that you would recommend, not today in this moment, but I'd like us to explore that. So I'll just want to put that on the record.
Okay, no, I mean, I think if you want to follow up.
If you would like to share.
Or maybe after this afternoon, since we're not voting on it yet, if there's,
Yeah, we're not meeting this afternoon. Our next meeting is.
Tomorrow.
I meant this afternoon of the discussion happening.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
just want to flag that. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. So more follow-up to come offline on that. The electrification amendment 18. Commissioner Singleton, this is your amendment, which adds some capital dollars to, to install electric vehicle charging at the Juvenile Justice Complex for the purpose of charging county and county partner fleet vehicles, and looking for some opportunities to leverage existing programs with the utilities and the federal federal and state incentives. And then the pay for on this is a principal investigator from the health department.
Yes.
Okay.
A vacant health department position. So it is a delay 1 year, so it's one time only. And this site in particular was chosen because of its location and comments from or statements from our colleagues, some from the state, who would also like to be able to charge vehicles there. I think this is really an attempt to do proof of concept instead of us pushing the cost of the electric infrastructure onto departments, that we pay for it out of a central space, and then health department. Then departments can start electrifying the fleet because they now have access to charging stations. I don't think it should be on departments to figure out how to build the electric infrastructure for the county.
Just a quick question. Did the pay for, did the actual position from the health department change from earlier version? I think it didn't.
It did from the first one because they then came back to me and about that particular position.
So I'm wondering if somebody from the health department could come speak to this, what this one does, and also maybe speak to, so last week, I spent the majority of the week trying to figure out what the actual vacancies were in the health department, because there were 189 listed. And I was trying to do it to understand two things. One, how many vacancies there actually were for a potential budget amendment, but also given the vacancies, what services weren't being, hadn't been offered, considering some of the vacancies appeared to be for a very long period of time. But at the end of all that, I think the answer I got is there was one vacancy. So I'd like the health department to come and talk about, is this the one vacancy that was available of the 189?
So I'd like to speak to my conversations with the health department. This came off of the presentation that they had. This was one of the maybe 3 positions that were general fund that had not been filled since their initial budget presentation, and wasn't slated to be used for bumps or the project saves. So there was only a few of those that I talked to them about and asked about, and this was one of those.
If you come forward and tell me what this position does, but also, and then maybe it's Justin Black who told me there was, like I say, I spent the better part of the week asking, and I think the final answer was there was one vacancy that was available, which I find interesting, but. was there actually two, and then this one is one of them?
For the record, Valdez Bravo, Deputy Director Operations, Health Department, he, him, his pronouns. Do you have a position number you're asking about in particular, Commissioner
It,
Bermudez?
I don't know,
This is the principal.
9798,
Okay, go ahead.
it's,
This is the principal investigator position that's in there.
Okay. 746472.
Hi, Kirsten Aird, she, her pronouns, Public Health Director. So that position was recently vacated in December. It was the manager of our community epidemiology program. This position is a program investigator, or a principal investigator, and so leads not just a team, but also does research, is part of our epi evaluation policy surveillance team, and is a lead contributor to our legal and epidemiology capabilities and public health, which are part of modernization, and were where we had our greatest deficit as well. So the role will be working in that.
so in non-technical terms, that person, when we have something like, I don't know, the measles, or what, put it in like layperson's terms.
Sure, absolutely. So think of the domicile unknown report. They lead that, and their team of epidemiologists would help contribute to analyzing the data. They are looking at our leading causes of death and can say what the trends are, what's been happening over time. They lead a team that alerts us to when we might be seeing something in our emergency room department data that says, oh, ding, 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 something's happening. So they both lead that, and then they themselves are epidemiologists that have the background and the experience in the work.
So when we get the disaggregated data about here are the leading cause of death for, say, specific groups in Multnomah County,
Correct.
that person is the one who leads that work?
Yep,
Okay.
yes.
So Commissioner Singleton, I have possibly a friendly amendment for this. I love the idea of having charging infrastructure for the county and helping to move forward the electrification of our vehicles. I'm not super comfortable with the pay for, just because there's a couple different amendments that actually take dollars out of the health department for other departments, and I feel like the health department I know has already gone through a lot of cuts and things like that. Assuming that Commissioner Moyer puts forward the amendment on the amended amendment for the ADA ramp, and there's additional dollars in vector control, would you be open to using some of those dollars for this? Okay, okay, great.
Just to be clear, that would be using the vector control?
So,
This 750 I'm putting back.
Right, but I'm just saying, so you're suggesting we use the vector control?
yes.
So we're not concerned then about the vector control? I'm just wanting, because
Well, I mean, there's plenty of amendments on the table right
I'm
now.
fine. I just wanted to be clear that if, what you're suggesting, that it come from the vector control.
So this is $200,000, so I'm not concerned about $200,000 coming out of the vector control pool for another capital project now.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
I actually would still like so, just curious, so that was the end result. So this was vacant. So you must have been referencing one other vacant position that you said was still vacant.
For the record, Justin Black, he, him pronouns, Deputy COO. So I don't think I ever said there was only one vacancy. I think there's been multiple spreadsheets that have, and I think that's created some of the confusion around the vacancies in the health department. So I think in an earlier spreadsheet you got from the health department, I think there was a couple, what they termed as truly vacant. This was not one of them. This was one that they had identified was ensures Multnomah County Public Health can stabilize required policy planning and EPI capacity as part of public health modernization. So they had identified that in an earlier spreadsheet. In the spreadsheets I sent you over the weekend, there was no added language around this position, so I didn't have any context for this one in that.
So the truly vacant positions are the ones, I mean, if it's not filled, even if it's critically important, it's actually vacant. It may be critical, but just in terms of vacant.
And I think that was part of the confusion with the context the health department was trying to give. This is a truly vacant position. They do need it for mission critical work. but it was not tagged as needed for bumping or revenue increasing.
Right. I guess, but when we talk about vacancies, I think it's perfectly appropriate for staff to say this is critically important, but also to acknowledge that it actually is vacant.
Yeah.
And, it'd be on a vacancy list, and it can be designated some way, like, we think this is absolutely critical that it be filled. But it also should be on the vacancy list if it's actually vacant.
Yeah, and it was on the vacancy list you received over the weekend, and I think it's been in the vacancy lists you have received.
Okay, thank you.
And I will just to go back to vector control for 1 second, I will say, in the dollar, oh, you guys don't need to stay here, but thank you. I appreciate the attention
Wow,
that
that was
we're giving to this. We are going to have, that is true. I mean, there is a capital obligation that is going to need to happen to vector control. Looking out in a couple of years and what the general fund deficit is going to be in FY29, front-loading some dollars to help with that this year seems prudent. But there have been a lot of amendments of really big sizes to that are pulling from those dollars. And so I think it's a question of how much burden do we want to take on in future years for that project versus today. And I think that's just a question that we all have to think about in terms of that and some of these other amendments that we have. So just wanted to put that out there. Okay. Commissioner Brim Edwards, there is Amendment 8B, which is the GIS position.
What amendment did you say? 18 is the one we just talked about.
8B. 8. So I'm just going off the list that was, 8C, I think it's called 8C now. I'm going off the list that everybody received where we grouped things, and I don't, it's not just a miscellaneous category, but they're in a random order as well, so I'm just going down the list.
Okay, so this amendment is adding 1 FTE expertise, which is about $160,000 into the Department of County Assets to provide GIS, which is mapping expertise to the Elections Division. It was requested by the Department of Community Services and recommended in the recent February 2026 Multnomah County Auditor's Election Division Audit Report to reduce the risk of mapping-related errors as happened in the 2024 primary. This, nationally, there's a lot of scrutiny on elections and, quote, fair elections. For me, this is, we know in Multnomah County, our elections division and team does an excellent job. We have fair elections with robust turnout, and this is giving them a tool that will get after an area that was identified as needing additional support. It has been modified after discussions with the chair, but originally I had the FTE going into the Department of Community Services. This position now is going to the Department of County Assets, where there is a team of GIS experts. They will have a dotted line to the election. This position will have a dotted line to the Elections Division Director, and when they're not doing the mapping and the GIS work for the Elections Division, it will go into, they'll be available to do work for the Department of County Assets. And the pay for is revenue amendment.
Okay, any questions about this? I know we heard from DCS about the need for this position in elections, and so any questions about this? Okay. Okay, great.
It'll just be when we all wrangle all the shared pay fors.
Right, exactly. I know. Everybody can be supportive of all the amendments, and then when it comes to pay for them, we got to figure that out. Okay, so next we have 3B, PFA permitting, and I should say Staff did put them in numerical order. I just kind of ignored that part of the script and went to my packet. So thank you for trying to save me from myself. Okay. 3B, this is the PFA permitting. We heard from the department on that.
It's both permitting and then one FTE and DCHS that will do clinical supervision for student interns to be in our preschool for all sites. I do have an update to this amendment. We're going to do just one staff position after further conversation with Balmer, so I'll bring an updated amendment that will reduce that 500,000 down.
So just a question about,
Hang on one second, please. It'll reduce it down to 198,812, so total amount will be $485,812.
a question, this is something I raised the other day about the 287,000 for the permitting, and just my discomfort with us paying for a City of Portland position. Is there, do we have some sort of, I guess, I'd like a little bit more information on like how many permits we think will be requested. So as we get to, and just the size of that, because it's, I mean, it's paying for a City of Portland staffer to do just that. How many permits do we expect there to go through this next year? So my assumption is with, now that we have actually more providers than we've had people apply for slots, it's great, we're getting almost to universality. Is that going to be on the downslope? And just what the utilization for paying for a city staffer would be?
What the utilization of paying for a city staffer would be? I'm not sure I understand that question.
So how many, like, for example, last year, X number of preschools needed help with permitting. I'm just trying to understand the scope of the need here and what we're paying for. Because we're paying, I assume at 287,000, we're paying for a full-time position at the
We're
city.
paying for a position that can do the approvals and address some of the concerns that Commissioner Moyer and I discussed last week when we talked about this amendment. I'd have to ask the department about numbers of preschools that went through the facilities and all of that, so that would be something we'd have to follow up on.
I mean, I
And it's paying
absolutely.
for this staff position because the way that permitting is currently happening for folks, it is taking an exorbitant amount of time, and the people trying to open the preschool are having to float dollars, so it's been really challenging for our providers to stay afloat with the current structure.
Some, just because this is pervasive across almost all permits, including ones that, for example, the school district has had or the county has.
Absolutely. This one, the target for me is
Can
because
I
it's an
finish my
economic
sentence?
development opportunity. And so I'm not trying to address the City of Portland's permitting problems. I'm trying to address the preschool for all permitting
If I
problems.
could finish my statement, please. I'm acknowledging the permitting issue. I would just like to understand if we have a full-time, what sort of agreement we have with the city, whether it's an IGA, that the size of our expected need, and then the agreement with the city that that position actually will be committed full-time to that work.
Yeah, so normally when we have, normally when we do these kinds of, swaps with the, or pay for it with the city, we do have an IGA or a memo of understanding. And I think we all want to make sure that we are not paying for time and work, especially with PFA dollars that is not related to PFA. So we'll make sure that whatever agreement has, it's very clear on how those dollars are being used and what that position is actually
Yep.
doing.
Just like our other agreements with the city. Yep.
Great, and then if I could get from the department, just last year's, the number of facilities or permitting that we are aware of that went through or that was requested, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so the ask is, and I don't know how much insight we have on that, so we'll,
We've got to have some if we...
but you guys can get that? Okay, great, yeah, we'll have the department follow up with that.
Thank you.
They can get that from PFA. Yes, just for PFA, yep, exactly, okay.
Yes, this is, and it's not for the other sites either.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the PFA permitting? Okay, we have 13B, Jones Dickson Moyer OSU extension.
Yeah, we'll tag team per usual. Beyond excited about this, just expanding or deepening the relationship with the OSU Extension Program. And this, as you know, the board put forward, we've established or reestablished the relationship with OSU Extension, and the purpose is to help get healthy foods out to the communities, and then also jobs and a whole host of other things. Right now, Commissioner Moyer is co-sponsoring, and Commissioner Brim Edwards, and I'm open for any additional questions.
Okay, and so the pay for this is the opioid offset
Yes.
revenue amendment. So it looks like in reading the description that this is to help to do a convening that OSU Extension will do.
Yes.
Will lead, which sounds like a one-time only thing. The revenue, the pay for on this is ongoing funds. So can you explain to me?
Yeah, so the purpose of the convening in of itself, they'll be bringing farmers together and then providers as well, as far as food distribution, and to meet annually as far as the impact, the overall impacts of the services here within the region, and then also to help build out the food systems. So that's an element of the fund.
So why do you need ongoing dollars to do for the convening?
That is a great question.
Okay.
I'm going to have staff come
Okay.
down, Ashley come down to break down just that. It's both the convening and then the overall work, because they'll be doing workshops throughout. We envision this to be a continuous partnership. It's not a one-time thing. So
Okay.
this to go on with it in the future.
Okay, and this is on top of the amount that we already have
On
in the
top of the
budget for
40,000.
OSU
Yes.
extension program? Okay.
Yeah. And it's expanding the work.
Okay, and then do you know how much other counties have in their budget for their OSU extension programs?
It varies.
Okay,
Yeah.
for Washington and Clackamas County, could you find that out?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
All
Thank
right.
you.
And then we'll come back to it, and I'll have Ashley come down to break.
okay, thank you.
One of the reasons why I'm supporting this is over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen, well, in addition to the fact that go Beavs, that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years a closing of grocery stores and and a reduction in access to food in East Portland for a whole variety of reasons. And I believe we need a systemic response, and I think OSU is in a really good position to lead this work in concert with the county. But we are finding places in East Portland where the only really access nearby for people for food is sort of the convenience stores, which we know is not generally access to healthy food choices. So I'm hoping that this will provide a systemic look at our food systems, especially healthy food systems in the county, and be able to help us build a much stronger network to fill in for the gaps that we know have happened because of the closing of grocery stores.
So Commissioner, are you then changing the offsetting cuts for your employment program because you use this full amount of revenue 3 there?
Pardon?
You use the full amount of revenue 3 in your employment programs amendment, and then this is another 110, and there's only 325 total in that amendment. So are you changing your offsets for your employment programs?
Yes, but I'm going to drop things at the end of the session.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Ashley?
Ashley,
Come on down.
Hello, good morning. I probably should not have run down the stairs before speaking to you all. Ashley Graff, Strategy and Policy Director, she, her pronouns. Thank you. So for the OSU extension amendment and the ongoing funding, the idea, yeah, all across the county, people suffer from hunger, particularly in East County, poor health outcomes, lower wages. So the vision is that food and agriculture can nourish and enrich members of the community. We have some of the richest agricultural land in the world here. There's a lot of good things happening already. So the convening is a critical part next year because we're going to bring together farmers, food banks, tourism folks, right, like stakeholders all across the community to understand what are the gaps and opportunities in the system, and then work on building a system together. So then what are the partnerships we need? What are the funding mechanisms we need to explore? How do we build something that lasts, that outlasts all of us? And it could go from a farm, right? People with their hands in the dirt, maybe healing as they transition out of homelessness or incarceration, all the way up to I'm designing the sensors in an indoor warehouse greenhouse that is growing 30,000 pounds of leafy greens in a year, and that's happening now. Mount Hood Community College's mechatronics program is working on that sort of thing with a private company. So there's a whole range of opportunities that we want to explore that could feed people and provide jobs. The ongoing piece is because OSU Extension is not only doing the convening, they have a lot of technical assistance support that they provide. So if they're working with a farmer, it's like, how do you get a watering system that saves water but gives the plants what they need at a particular time? Or how do you get your food to market? Or how do you build, a hoop house? So they're helping smaller farms all the time do the things that they need to do to grow food.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's worth thinking about, and although I have significantly less agricultural land than District 4 does, I do have it.
Topaz Farm is in your...
Topaz, yes. Woo, Sub Island, woo, Northwest.
Go Beefs.
Go Beefs. But I think one of the things that I have spent a lot of time on is, what is our role in economic development, and who isn't served by the others. And this is largely unincorporated Multnomah County, so they don't fall into Greater Portland and all of those great organizations. But also, how do we do what we do, which one of those things is to address food insecurity, in a way that has a multiplying effect in our economy? And part of that is this idea that you look to local purveyors, you keep money locally, it employs local people, and you help make those connections with your convening power. So I think a lot about Lift Up, which is a food bank in my district that does focus on this type of approach. They do work with some purveyors in my district and Commissioner Jones Dixon's district, and they're bringing food to homebound seniors. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes we don't think of how this fits into, like, does the county do that? But it is this specific intersection of local, fresh food and our food system that I like as a model of economic development, and nobody else fills that void because, unless it's state dollars, because they're unincorporated.
Yeah, and we heard from one of the senators this past year that 85% of our food is exported outside of the state of Oregon, so 15% of the food stays here. So we're like, how do we flip that on its head with all the farmers that are here? So thank you, Ashley, for coming down and answering the question. Obviously, you had your coffee this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
I think it would
You
be
have another
helpful. No, not a question, just if you could add some of the language in here about that ongoing piece, it would help it make it more clear for me why it's ongoing dollars.
Yes.
I would also add, I think this is in District 1, there OSU has the Food Innovation Lab, which is like looked at as a global, I know you you have a lot of. It's actually super cool. It is. But it, and just speaking to economic development, this is a place where, in addition to feeding our local community with healthy foods, it's also a place where we have traded sector exports, and they're not just, some of it is the actual commodity, but others, like fresh blueberries, but others are, there's value added here in the food processing, a place where Oregon has always had a very strong presence. And OSU has, the Food Innovation Center is doing lots of work just with emerging markets around the world to take our fresh food and get it out to the rest of the world as well. And again, just from an economic development and economic activity standpoint, it's a value add.
Great, thank you. Commissioner, we've heard from some advocates about this amendment, but that this is about riparian zone restoration. Do you know if there's, I know.
Riparian zone restoration.
So, I don't know, my staff will follow up with Ashley. I just want to be clear on what this is and isn't for the dollars. Okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have judges waiting. Thank you for your patience. We have one more amendment to go. So we have 21, protective detail. I know, that's what they said.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then one ask from the audience was that people remember to use their mics because folks are having a hard time hearing us. So, okay.
What number is it?
21B.
This is mine.
Yes, it's about security detail, protective services security.
So.
I'm not sure what this does because I don't know what this is.
I've made a change since I first introduced it. So when I first introduced it, it was in January asking the workplace security director to look at the first 18 months of the leadership protective security detail, make some comparison to other public sectors just in terms of cost, and to make recommendations. That it was also to put the money into contingency, and the current amendment no longer puts it has the same requirements to, this was a new program. It is just a look back to see whether we have the most cost-effective system, and comparing it to other local jurisdictions that might have a protective security detail, and having the Director of Security provide recommendations.
Okay, so since there's no money actually moving, is this going to become a budget note?
It could.
Okay.
Potentially.
Okay, I mean, I just feel like it doesn't.
It could.
Yeah.
Like I say, it started as a movement of funds into just the half year, but I've removed that.
Okay. I think it would be a great budget note. Okay.
I'll take that under advisement.
Okay. Okay. Otherwise, I don't know what we're actually doing from the budget perspective. But this is great. Okay. That concludes our miscellaneous amendments. Thanks, everyone, for the discussion. Thank you to the departments, as always, for your willingness to help answer our questions. We are going to move on to the next part of our agenda today, which is a discussion on pretrial. How much do you have? Because
It'll take me less than 5 minutes.
okay, so we're going to have updates for some amendments, and then we'll move on to pretrial.
No, but I want to get on the table just so that Christian can get going. Sorry.
We will have time for amendments at the end as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And budget.
Well, one of them's already been referenced. So first, I'd like to pull countywide amendment 14D. And I'm doing that because I'm co-sponsoring countywide amendment 20 and 31 with Commissioner Jones Dixon. I'm also introducing budget notes and a couple of amendments, and I'll start with the budget notes. This is relating to the libraries, and it's a budget note to the library district budget. There's a remaining approximately $25 million in taxable balance in the library capital bond after all projects have been completed by August 14th, 2026, and before using the unanticipated $25 million in additional resource left in the library capital bond, the county commission requests an examination of allowable uses in alignment with measure 26-211 and provide options to the commission on how to use the funds. That's the first. Then the second budget note is regarding to receiving quarterly updates from the district attorney's office regarding data trends. So the county, essentially, the county commission requests the district attorney's office will provide quarterly updates to the Board of County Commissioners and the local Public Safety Coordinating Council regarding strategic prosecution activities, emerging crime trends, and coordinated response efforts. Updates may include information related to crime patterns, prosecution strategies, cross-agency coordination, and outcomes associated with high-impact offenses such as auto theft, burglary, robbery, and other emerging public safety concerns. The intent of the reporting is to support transparency, strengthening coordination across the public safety system, including the sheriff, the district attorney, local law enforcement, DCJ, and ensure strategic prosecution efforts remain responsive and adaptable to changing community conditions and crime trends. And this is complementary to the data work that we anticipate will be underway by the LIPSC staff that have been added. There's that. Okay. This is an amendment to countywide amendment number 5C. This relates to the adding of the senior legal assistants. It restores the 3 FTE, the represented employees, for $386,000 in the district attorney's budget to meet the longstanding need to shift administrative responsibilities from deputy district attorneys to legal staff. It allows them to focus on their legal work and utilizes their expertise, improving efficiency and case handling capacity. I am changing the pay for to first quarter vacancy savings, or 1 quarter of vacancy savings in that reduced scope of savings. And then I'm introducing a revenue amendment. It's a new one, 15, and this aligns with my earlier comments about the majority of the staffing reductions coming from direct service or direct line staff, and it would be taking $429,000 from the Office of the COO and DCM, again at the top of the county administrative staff. And then finally, almost finally, I am introducing an amendment that would restore, it's budget neutral, restores the youth-to-youth crisis line that delivers life-saving support and connects every day, and connections every day. That includes training, support, and supervising the youth volunteers to answer crisis calls, texts, and chats with other young people. These are 3 represented employees, or staff who supervise. It's amazing if you haven't ever been out to the youth lines and seen the work they're doing. It's a peer-to-peer, I feel, life-saving service that's offered. And the offset is coming from the funds that I just, it's contingent upon the passage of the revenue amendment I just offered. And then finally, this is a board amendment that Multnomah County needs to modernize its jail facility infrastructure for safety and to meet today's needs, and has been a recommendation of the Corrections Grand Jury Report. I also encourage that we put it in the long-range capital plan. It also was a one-time requested departmental package from the Sheriff's Office. and I pay for it with funds from the vector control, and I will note that I removed the vector control when I withdrew the portion that I had used on employment services. I removed that when I pulled back countywide Amendment 14D. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brim Edwards. And so we'll go ahead and move on to pretrial. Thank you for this. So we've had many discussions, and we have some amendments on the table regarding pretrial. So this is a time that we can dig in a little bit more on that. I will say that there was an amendment that I had dropped last Thursday that added an additional $950,000 towards a pretrial transition. That was on top of the the $1 million that was in my original budget. The courts sent a letter on Friday that stated their inability to meet the expectations of the transition strategy without a commitment to ongoing funding. I'm really willing to look at all opportunities to make these dollars ongoing in order to resource a more successful transition. I think we want this to be as successful as possible. So today I'm going to be dropping an amendment to my amendment to make those funds ongoing so that in fiscal year 28 the courts would receive a total of $1.4 million to support their program. And that's in addition to the $475,000 ongoing in county provide supportive services. That brings the total amount of funding towards pretrial to $1.953 million ongoing. I think we have stated before that we are going to be working very closely with the legislators and with the courts for ongoing funding for pretrial services to ramp up the number of staff that we have that's paid for by the state so that we're aligned with what other counties are doing, so that we can continue to stably resource this in the future. But I wanted to share that, and I have some handouts that talk a little bit about what's the details of the updates there.
Are you still using revenue amendments?
Yes, still using revenue amendments.
Thanks.
All right.
So just so I understand, so you're still using 1 million, the 1 million that was the one-time only,
Yes, $1 million.
and then
So,
then the 1.9 is of ongoing is additive?
so the total amount is going to be $1.95 million. That includes the $1 million of one-time only, but I'm actually
You're
switching
going to
those
make that to ongoing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of conversation about when it might start. So July 1, we were told by the courts that they can't stand a decision for July 1. So what is going to be continued? So say if this were this is very, in some ways similar to the larger framework, but just with less money that I had in my amendment. What services, who's going to do the services starting July 1?
Yeah, so this
And is that part of the 1.9?
Yes, so part of the 1.9 includes $800,000 for closed street supervision to continue the supervision that they are doing. So their caseload would continue while we finalize an IGA with the courts and they're able to hire additional staff to ramp up.
So the 800K takes us to when?
About probably like January.
So that covers what we had identified in the larger framework that had been put forward, which is on 9B, the countywide amendment 9B. Does that is for the high risk?
So Chair, I think it might be more helpful to walk through, because you've got two amendments here.
Yeah.
And so there's two different pieces. One is the transition, which is a little bit more than $1 million, and the other is then the new program, which is 38B, is my understanding. And so this is the one that gets to the what is the half-year operations once a transition actually happens.
Yes, and I'm inviting a friend up to help.
Hi, folks. Natalie Minus, she, her pronouns, policy advisor for the chair, and some of this answer may also require some of the court's input as well. And so the update to this amendment just makes all of the one-time only dollars ongoing. And so in FY27, there's still a financial strategy to fund $800,000 worth of Close Street to have a longer ramp down portion. But then in FY28, that same amount of funding could get transferred to the courts.
And what's happening to the other services? Who's doing the assessment and what had been DCJ's pretrial service for the lower risk?
So I think that there's an element of what will be happening this year versus what the future pretrial structure will need.
Right, I guess I'm just going to focus right now on the July 1 to December 31st. So it makes sense, the sheriff, like, we know what that looks like, right? And they're doing the high-risk population. There is the work that DCJ did, which was the assessment, and then the court reminders and everything else. Who's doing that? DCJ still?
DCJ said that they'll be able to have some limited coverage. Our next pretrial subcommittee meeting is June 8th. And so I think that'll be a topic of conversation.
Well, I actually think before we approve something, we should hear from DCJ about what they can approve, because otherwise it might just be going, like, heading off a cliff. I mean, I don't think anybody's agreed that, I mean, we have to have services.
Good morning. For the record, sorry about that. Denise Pena, DCJ Director. I use she and her pronouns. So, Commissioner, I think there's two different services that we're talking about. There's about the monitoring for the low-level, lower-risk clients. Our understanding is that those services would cease on June 30th, and that program would close. Then separate from that is the work of the assessment that our RECOG team does on behalf of the courts and MCSO as well. And so I'll have Tira kind of go into that more specifically about what that would look like. I will say that we were able, and some of our managers are here in the room, so thank you for them, to putting together a plan which still leaves some gaps. And this is also one of those plans with zero room for error in terms of sickness, vacations, life. And so it is a plan that we could do, but it does concern me that for us to be able to continue the services, I think what would probably be best, and what DCJ would advocate for, is to have 2 FTEs added back to DCJ. We could do that with one-time only funding, and so that way we could continue the assessments as they have been. And the reason I would advocate for one-time only, I think it would be easier to find the revenue for that, and this ultimately then gets DCJ through the transition phase, but ultimately that responsibility would get transferred over by the court to the courts.
So would it be 2 FTE added back just through December 31st?
If that is the timeline that we're working at, yes.
What's the cost of that?
So 1 FTE, the classification is a corrections technician. It's about $140,000 a year. I'm sorry, $143,000. And so if we're adding 2, that's 286, divide Christian math, right? Divide by 2.
6 months.
That'd be about $143,000, I believe.
Total.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
And that's for just the assessment portion, correct?
Correct.
So there would be right now, no monitoring, who's doing the, like, court reminders or any of the other pieces? It just.
With the closure of PSP, all that would cease.
Okay.
So there would need to be a ramp-up period as the courts took on that type of supervision.
Correct. And part of the pretrial subcommittee was a caseload review of all the clients that are currently on monitoring between PSP and MCSO, and making, doing what we can to combine or.
But is that with the courts? I guess maybe this is the point in time we should have the courts come talk about how this works for them, since they're Angelo, thank you.
Before you leave, can I just ask one clarifying question? For the we'll call it supervision. I think that's a stretch of the word supervision. You are literally having staff call to remind someone of a court date. Is that correct? That we are paying people.
Correct, and we call it monitoring.
That's okay. That's a wild use of the word monitor. Have we ever looked into an automated system?
Yeah, maybe that's how, this would be good for the courts to share, maybe how they look at it going forward, because actually they think there's, like, this is the go forward, that there can be efficiencies in, if they're doing end-to-end, it also, efficiencies on stepping people down.
So did you want to answer the question, though? Because I'm curious if you had looked at that previously about automated.
Well, I think that's where it goes to the difference between PSP and the staff that do the reminders, and then the CTs that are living in a recog unit that do the assessments. And so that would all conclude, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I will just say from the conversations that particularly with the courts in Lipsick about this has been, the new system can actually add an additional reminder from the two that are current, as well as the option to add some behavioral language that I know folks have been advocating for that has been more effective in other systems. So I think there's some pluses to the new system that the court is planning to move to.
All right, so your names have been called upon, so please, thank you so much. Judge Biblick and Barb for being here, we appreciate that. And so I know that you received an updated proposal, I think yesterday, just to make sure that you were aware of some of the changes in the switch to ongoing dollars, but would love to, there's been a lot of conversation about what does this exactly look like, and there's obviously ongoing conversations for pretrial, so I just would love to open it up to you.
If you could sort of bifurcate it into that transition, and then what could be the new system would be really helpful.
Sure. I'm Judge Michael Greenlick. I'm the chief criminal judge. So first, on the transition, we don't know exactly what that will look like. We know that pretrial services program through DCJ will, I understand the budget will be such that that will be shuttering on June 30th. We've had an initial meeting about what to do about that, because there are close to, I think, 300 people that are currently being monitored by PSP. And so some of those folks are on electronic monitoring because there's some sort of a high risk identified, either because probably they're high risk because of DUI convictions or because of domestic violence cases pending. And so those folks, we may need to slide back up to closed street so they can at least take charge of notifying the court if there's a violation of the electronic monitoring. We are hoping that wouldn't take a lot of resource from closed street, because that would be the extent of their monitoring, is just notifying us if there was a violation. There will be a lot of people that will, where the condition of release that they report to PSP will be terminated. And we will have to notify people that they no longer will need to call into PSP. And there will be a whole process, because these were release conditions put on, through a judge made these decisions. Victims are relying on them in some way. And so we may need to do dozens, hopefully not hundreds, of hearings to sort of formalize the change in the supervision plan. The district attorney's office is looking through all the cases to see if they can come to some agreement on just terminating that portion of their conditional release. And if we can do that without having dozens of hearings, that would be great. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we're going to do the best we can to notify people and to step them down to essentially release on recognizance.
So for this, the transition period, anybody on electronic monitoring, the courts doesn't have the capacity to do that. That would go theoretically back to Close Street?
if they had capacity. The other thing that will be, need to be thought
It would
of,
have to go somewhere, right?
right, they would have to go somewhere, or the electronic monitoring condition would be terminated if there's nobody to, keep track of it. Judges will start making decisions, release decisions, starting about now, probably, knowing that they should not be telling people to report to PSP. And I think in some cases, we're talking about the low risk, not low risk, but the relatively minor offenses, the nuisance offenses, people that continuously fail to appear. There's been maybe some sort of a conceit that PSP would be helpful because judges really don't want to hold those people in jail, so they release them in order them to report to PSP, even if they think that chances of that succeeding are relatively low. If we don't even have that option anymore, I imagine there'll be more of those low-risk folks who have repeatedly failed to come to court, probably will be held without some sort of a low-level monitoring program.
Just to clarify, when you're saying low risk, you mean type of charge, not failure to appear. They're actually high risk of failure to appear?
I said that poorly. You're right. They're high risk of failure to appear, maybe low level in terms of seriousness of offense.
Thank you.
So we don't know what that's going to look like. Any other questions on the transition? Yes.
Good morning. Barb Marcial, Trial Court Administrator for the court. Just to clarify the question that you asked Commissioner Moyer about the court reminders, that's something that the court does currently. The court has an automated system where everybody that we do have contact information for, and we make a concerted effort to collect that contact information when somebody's released from custody. There's an automated call made to them 1 week prior to a court appearance and 1 day prior to a court appearance with that reminder. So that will be ongoing regardless of the PSP monitoring.
So I'm just curious, is that like your doctor's office where you press 1 to confirm? Or is it just a push out with no?
Great question. I don't believe there's any press 1 to confirm, but I've never asked that and haven't received a call myself, so I'm not entirely sure. I believe it's just a message that's left for people and they don't have to affirmatively communicate, but I will investigate.
Because it may, that number may or may not be good, and so if there's no coming back, the courts may not know whether somebody actually received the notice.
And Commissioner Brehm-Edwards and Commissioner Singleton, you talked about this as well. Once we transition to a new system, we're going to use what's called the e-supervision program. It has capacity, we believe, to do behavioral messaging, where you will be able to press buttons if you need help or be told who to call if you need help getting to court, for example.
Thank you, guys. So a couple things I'm interested in is, so we also, part of what this funds is some of the ongoing case management and peer work that I think we have talked about, and I think has been conversations with the pretrial group on the need for those services. I think that's going to take a little while to ramp up and get things hired or to get contracts ready. So there's potentially some savings in like the first quarter of the new fiscal year as we're ramping up those programs that we may be able to use for some transition dollars. So that's actually something, Natalie, that I think that we should take a look at and see what that might look like in terms of what's realistic for getting those services up and running.
On the victim advocate, I know some folks from the DA's office are here. That one, I'm not clear, is that a new position or are we backfilling some other, because I know there's been some reductions to victim advocate services. Sorry.
And while we're talking about people who want to come down to answer questions, I'd love to have, I think Katie's here from the Sheriff's Office, talk about the capacity for the Sheriff's Office or Close Street Supervision managing electronic monitoring during the ramp down.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that question. Adam Brown, Chief of Staff to the District Attorney's Office. I'm going to let Natalie lead that, and then I'll provide support.
Yeah, so this is really for supportive services for victims, and so that would be for the victim advocates to deploy as they see fit. It would be a portion of the pretrial system that we're excited about to resource in the future, but is not something that's well-resourced now.
Gotcha. So it's leveraging existing staff, but giving some flexible assistance dollars there.
Yeah, there's sort of two aspects. client assistance or flexible assistance funds. Plus, we expect there's some marginal labor obligation that's going to come with this, so that's baked in too. We don't know exactly how that would be administered as of yet. It's not enough for a full FTE, but with braided funding for this kind of program, sometimes that fractional amount goes a long way to helping us retain something we otherwise wouldn't be able to due to loss of grant funds. So that's how we've thought about it.
Yeah, great. I'm excited that that position's in, or that those dollars at least are in here.
So I have a question about the, this is the ongoing and the 1.9 million. And with the caveat that you, I think, just said, I'm seeing 475,000, which would be non-court funding and non-DCJ funding. That, would the 475, the 250, 125, and 100, that would come out of the 1.9?
So it's a little bit complicated, and I'm looking to my budget people, because what we're doing is we're allocating additional funds to this program offer, and then we're also swapping out one-time only money with ongoing funds. So what happened when we were putting together my proposed budget is that we ended up actually having more needs for dollars in the one-time only budget than, and we had some additional ongoing dollars. So we took some ongoing dollars and turned them into one-time only to fund the permanent sobering and crisis stabilization capital needs, knowing that down the line, we would be able to use those dollars for the operations of the center in a couple years. And so that was just trying to help future boards of commissioners and the county to have some resources. But we could swap those dollars out because they are ongoing dollars.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm just trying to figure out is, are you including that as part of the 1.9?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to set up the math problem that I see. And we've got, I think, the right people at the table here. So currently, the system with DCJ and the sheriff, and then the other resources at the county, is approximately $5 million to do that sort of end-to-end. The courts, in the framework that I had shared earlier, the courts would assume the low risk, the high risk, and electronic monitoring. And that would cost about $2.6 million of ongoing funding from the county. So going from 5 million to 2.6, getting a more efficient system, and with the court adding in 4 positions, I think doing a whole reorg and adding in 4 positions. So, but the cost of the county would be 2.6. Do I have that approximately right? And you're doing end-to-end and having that sort of data end-to-end, also being able to step people down as appropriate, and hopefully getting better outcomes for everybody involved. So do I have the math correct? Where you're nodding? Okay.
Yes.
So the question, and the framework also anticipated things like that are in the 475,000, but it would be on top of, not in addition to the 2.6 million just to run the system. So I'm seeing a gap of, let's see, between 1.5, almost $1 million, a little bit over $1 million between what the courts say they need to run, like to go from the assessments at the very beginning, which DCJ wouldn't have to do anymore, all the way through the high risk, the low risk, the high risk, the electronic monitoring. So that's the, if we include these, which I say, the framework that I had included that, but there's still about a little bit over a $1 million gap in terms of what the court would need to run that program.
Yeah, I mean, the county, we have been funding $3.7 million for pretrial monitoring services, and that was with 19 FTE across DCJ and MCSO. What we're trying to do is find more efficient ways to do this and less expensive ways to do this, and also recognize where we are with the budget situation and the resources we have available.
Right. Like I say, I think that what we have is a cheaper system. And it's all, because both staffing, some of the positions are less expensive at the courts, but also because the courts are putting some of their own funds in, but it's still a gap. Like, we don't yet have enough money to pay for that end-to-end system. And I will say, at least in the midterm, we've all agreed that ultimately we will be going to the state and asking for them to cover this, advocating for that together, but just in the short term. And like, I'm thinking this is the January 1, that we wouldn't have a system that is that end-to-end system without like another $1 million.
So Chair, I would love to work with you and see if there's ways we can get to closing some of that gap. I know we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I'm also not seeing anything on the table to close that $1 million gap, so I don't think we're going to solve that in this current conversation. But I'm committed to work with you and see if we can figure out closing that $1 million gap that still exists.
I would appreciate it, and I think I appreciate all the conversations that you all have had, and I think it's like being realistic about where we may be able to get to and what we're able to do for, what's needed. So,
I guess the one thing that I'm concerned about is that if we don't, I think this requires a very robust conversation with the courts, because if literally on January 1, the county is done, which I think is what's contemplated in this model. So we have sort of a cobble together for the next 6 months, but a commitment to the courts that on January 1, because you're not going to do your reorganization and commit the 4 people without the resources. Is that?
If I could address that, Commissioner Brim Edwards, you're right. This doesn't get us to the $2.6 million that you proposed in your amendment, and that we would anticipate we would need to sort of take over all of pretrial and also have some, somewhat equivalent monitoring to what Close Street is currently doing. And when you say it's $3.7 million to our current monitoring cost, this program and what this program would pay for is not just monitoring, but also the DCJ function of their multiple employees in the RECOG unit who are administering the presiding release order and doing the risk assessment. So we would take that on too. So when you talked about the cost of those employees doing those functions, it's well north of $3.7 million. What sort of our North Star and is that we need to have a foundation for this pretrial system, and that will cost roughly $960,000 a year to do the function of PSP, to do the function of the RECOG unit, or the primary function of the RECOG unit, and to also do the function the court has been doing with pretrial in terms of indigent defense, in writing the release assistant officer reports that go to the judge for pretrial decisions. So for that, we would need 23 RAOs, 7 of which would come from the county at a cost of roughly $960,000 a year. So that's covered in this dollar figure. What's not covered is much else to do the higher risk monitoring that Close Street currently does. And you'll see that $800,000 is allocated the last 6 months of this year to do the ramp down of Close Street for 6 months. That amount is then transferred to the court for an entire year. It's not a ramp down, it's an entire year. And so when we look at that, we probably would only have because we're also taking on electronic monitoring, there probably wouldn't be more than staff for a couple of people. And so that's where the deficiency would fall. And what we've tried to make clear is the letter we sent out last week is we're not willing to just do the higher risk monitoring because that leaves us with a huge hole that we have right now, which is a cohesive pretrial system that we hopefully can get support from the state to cover those RAO positions. I don't think the state will ever cover the high risk monitoring, but they may cover the 7 RAOs to give us the basic function where we can then use the statewide systems like the Oregon pretrial assessment tool and the e-supervision program, keep data well. It all depends on what's going on with the budget with the state, but that would be some possibility of doing that in the future.
So Judge, are you comfortable with what's presented now, knowing that we have to advocate in the next legislative session for the funds that you're, the RAO, or
Thanks, Commissioner. I would say yes, we appreciate the change to ongoing funding, and that $478K would cover those base 7 RAO positions to get us to this new structure. What it wouldn't get us very far in is staffing the enhanced monitoring or monitoring of the higher risk personnel. And so some of the language in the proposed amendment indicated that transition had to happen right away in the next calendar year in 2027. We would have very few resources for doing that enhanced monitoring. And so the expectation would need to be that would need to generate some additional, funding to make it a more robust enhanced monitoring program. And that could be incremental, over time. That could be, start out with a very limited capacity potentially for the highest risk people. And then we'd be gathering better data so that we would be able to, really see where the gaps were going forward and make requests for additional funding for enhanced monitoring, if that were needed by the system. But if the expectation was that we would be providing enhanced monitoring as well as electronic monitoring in the next calendar year, we would certainly not be able to do that to the extent or with the capacity that Close Street has now. It looks like it would leave about $560K if it costs $920,000 a year for the 7 RAO positions. That would leave a little over $500,000 for enhanced monitoring if we were receiving that ongoing funding of $1,478. And so depending on proportionally how much of that needed to cover the cost for electronic monitoring, those contracts have been about $300K a year. And so if that was right off the top, then that would really only cover maybe 1 to 2 positions to do that function. If the choice was made by the system to fund more personnel and not to fund electronic monitoring right away, or if that was an aspirational thing for the future, that could be the potential. The one concern from the court would be that ongoing funding wouldn't cover the full enhanced monitoring program that either Close Street is currently doing or that Commissioner Grimm-Edwards had proposed in her framework.
In fiscal year 28.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't get you wouldn't hire the pretrial support specialists?
There's a couple of folks who've been
So we'll do Commissioner Moyer, and then we'll go to Grimm-Edwards.
Okay. One, I want to ask my fellow commissioners, this is a major ticket item. Which one of your amendments that spends this exact same money are you taking off the table? Because we have so little wiggle room. Or where's the cut for this? Because I just feel like everyone loves every amendment. Great. We have spent the same revenue like 10 times over. So we got to start being real. Please remove amendments that spend this too, if this is something we want to do. The second thing is, I'm just going to be totally, I've always said, I'm not an expert at this. This is not my area of expertise. But when I think about why the county should partner in pretrial, what is the relationship here? If we are at a place in our budget, and I believe we are, that we are like essential services, if we do not legally have to provide it, largely we're cutting it, and it's painful. We have to provide a jail. We are legally required to operate a jail. We are frequently on the edge of operating it at over the ideal capacity. That happens regularly. Losing Close Street really jeopardizes jail population. And I heard that. I definitely feel like I got that understanding, that there is a population of individuals that judges are going to be uncomfortable releasing unless they are on some level of supervision. I get that. And yet, that's like the one thing that seems to be up in the air. Like, are we going to fund that? And the other, and it's not that I don't think it's important, people showing up to court is important. I am not convinced that calling them and reminding of their court date while they are also getting an automated call moves the needle. I certainly don't understand using like staff, a very staff-intensive model to do that. And I don't understand like how that is a core Multnomah County function. Like just reminding people to go to court, important. We are not the court. There is the judicial department who should pay for this because they are the court. We need to be funding what is of deep mutual benefit, in my mind. And I had conversations with the presiding judge because, again, I was like, there are all these competing amendments. I don't understand what everything is. She told me that the higher public safety risk was her priority. I feel like I just have a really hard time with how we are going to, unless somebody is going to show me something else we're cutting. We are spending this money like multiple times. And what is the county's core responsibility? Like for me, if we can't get all the way here, I don't know, maybe we can. Certainly not spending the same revenue over again, but like if we can't get all the way here, I am much more interested in funding supervision that alleviates a fear for public safety. Because I do think public safety is our role. You know, keeping the community safe and controlling jail population is our role. So I'm just going to put that out there. If we can't come up with magic money, because we're doing magic math, if we're going to do not 100%, I'm just going to put my foot or my hand on the scale for Close Street version. Like I am happy to have the courts do it. We have some reasons it would be very difficult for us to continue to do it in a different way, but like I'm not against getting to 100%. I don't know where that money's coming from. If we can't, I'm going to put my finger on the scale. I know the court really would like everything. Again, if we can find money, I'm not against that, but like, I think our role is public safety.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is that you are interested in figuring out how we can get to higher level supervision soon, like as soonest in the transition.
And if we can't, I mean, I'm just being honest. Yeah. We're using the revenue amendments here. We use them in every other thing. So like, are we going to vote, all of us, to spend our revenue amendments here and not on the other things we spend it on? I don't know.
I just want to note,
yeah, I'm trying to get us to real, because we are like
it's an
2
issue
days
with multiple pay-fors.
Totally, it totally is. And this people might say, well, actually, like, I love this, but I love this over here more. Totally fair. I'm just saying, if we're not going to get to 100%, and if we're all not willing to give up our pet projects, then we got to talk about what we are going to do.
Yeah.
I'm saying, if we are not going to be able to get to 100%, I would weigh in on I'd rather fund the Closed Street portion.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that clarity, Commissioner. Adam, I'm going to thank you for your time. I'm going to invite Katie up because I know that you had there was a outstanding question around the transition for electronic monitoring, and potentially you have thoughts on some of the conversation that's been happening here.
Sure. Good morning. Katie Burgard, Chief of Staff at the Sheriff's Office. I was going to come up to just confirm for the judge that, yes, the Sheriff's Office Close Street could cover the additional electronic monitoring as we worked through the ramp down, that I didn't see that as a barrier at all.
So I just want to respond to Commissioner Moyer. I'll say, like, the magic math happened in the budget because the $1 million was never, like, identified that it would pay for the services. I mean, in no conversation that I was part of as part of pretrial, that $1 million would pay for an end-to-end system. And so I guess I look at it as like, and I've said that when I laid down the framework, is that in the chair's budget, it did not fund what it said it was going to do, or there didn't seem there was any sort of connection between the where we are now to where we wanted to go. And so to me, I felt like that was, not the commission's responsibility at the first time, but really the chair's responsibility to put something forward that worked for all the systems partners, DCJ, the courts, the sheriff's office. It's a functioning system. So
I'll just respond to that. I mean, one, by the time my budget decisions need to be made, there wasn't a fully fleshed out proposal. But that being said, we also have to face the reality that we have limited funds. Of course, I knew that there was going to be dollars available during this time of the budget process, because there is, even if it was just the contingency from last year that was rolling over. But the fact is, we have to, I think that this is an opportunity in setting up a transition to a new system to look at how we can streamline what we're doing to be the most efficient and the most dollar amount, because we are, the state isn't in as much of a budget crunch, but we are this year, and we are going to continue to be out years. And I think that we have to, that's a reality that we have, and that's one that we're going to need your partnership in terms of what is realistic in order to fund on an ongoing way to provide this. And I do appreciate my North Star has always been the how are we making sure that the pretrial system does the best to ensure public safety for our community in terms of who we're supervising and how we're providing that supervision.
And I will just say, for me, I've been trying to think about this, because it's cleaner, as two different things. There's pretrial transition, which is ramp down, the Close Street piece, that's part of that 1 million, and then the new system of what the courts are looking for as a different piece. And so I actually don't see competing amendments here, because I think they're different activities. And I'm trying to get to I know there's more than $1 million needed for the transition, as well as a gap existing in the ongoing program, the new program. So yes, absolutely, I think that's part of the conversation, is how do we get there and what comes off the table to do it. I would say, I would really love for us all to commit to this being our top priority in Salem for this ask, because if we don't go in lockstep, or it's number 10 on the court's list or number 20 on ours, then it's not, I just think that sets us up for not getting what we need.
Ditto.
Can I respond to that, Commissioner? I just wanted to be clear that our court, the Multnomah County Circuit Court, does not go to the legislature to make any requests. It's the Chief Justice for the Oregon Judicial Branch that makes those requests. And so we can try to influence those, requests, and we already have had discussions with the Chief Justice. She is willing, as I understand it, to ask for funding for additional release assistance officers. I can't say that it's going to be her top priority across the state. I know that we're down a whole lot of judicial positions, staff positions across the state, and also security. So those are other top issues for the Chief Justice. That doesn't mean that there won't be advocacy, but I just wanted to be clear that I can't say that it would be the top priority for the Chief Justice.
I appreciate that, and I would say that a lot of lobbying doesn't happen in Salem, so how you all prioritize it is very important.
Mike.
So I would be interested, and I don't need this right this moment, but like maybe before tomorrow, of what it is that you would need to stand something up on January 1, because I'm uncomfortable being like, we'll figure it out. Because I think when I look at what you had envisioned, it requires you to change people's current jobs and also to hire people. And I don't think you're going to do that with we're going to figure it out. Versus like what exactly would you need by when in order to sort of flip the switch on January 1 on a set of services? Because it sounds like maybe we can get through 6 months, but then we have a cliff that we don't have an agreement on services. But I don't think we can wait to the cliff. Like, you would need to be doing a whole host of things in the coming months and commit to them in order for us to have this sort of smooth transition on January 1.
Thanks, Commissioner. You're exactly right. In terms of the January 1, 2027 date, that would be a tentative date. The development of an IGA is going to be something that will require a lot of negotiation. It's an unprecedented agreement of this type, and we'll need to, work through a lot of things in it. In addition to just the parameters, how we manage ongoing funding versus an expectation that the state may be able at some point in the future to cover some portion of that funding. Those are all things that we would need to work out. I would say that the cliff would be to what extent the 800K would be able to continue to fund Close Street, or if there's some additional funding that might be available for this fiscal year if the court's not able to get started with our pretrial monitoring, functioning program in January. There might be some additional savings there that could be allocated towards Close Street. But this 1.478 wouldn't cover the enhanced monitoring program. It would just be sort of a step in that direction. And so that would be what would cease to exist once Close Street ceased to exist. We would potentially be able to hire a position or two positions, depending on how much funding was available, but we wouldn't be able to form a fully functional enhanced monitoring program based on this funding commitment, if that makes sense.
Let me ask it just a slightly different way, because I think it's less, I'm assuming the IGA, like, we can get an agreement. Once we have an agreement, it can be written out in an IGA format. We've got lots of lawyers to do that. It's more, in order to do anything by January 1, when would you need to, say, if we're going to stand up a replacement for the high risk on January 1, we would need to know by October 1st that we had X resources, just for example. Or if we're going to set up because doing the assessments and that pretrial system with we talked about sort of the sort of foundational pieces, like, when would you need to know that, again, in order for you to start converting your positions and posting and hiring the other positions? Again, I don't need to know right now, but it's not so much like, can we write out an IGA, but like, what is it and when do you have to know by in order to be able to set something up on January 1?
Marty on. We would need to, we've heard from the county that there would be a commitment to ongoing funding. We would need to be, well on the way to negotiation of that agreement for us to feel comfortable moving forward with the recruiting and reorganization that would be required. Exactly what date is hard to say, but I would say, soon we would need to start having some, talking turkey discussions in terms of what that IGA would entail. And if we have a commitment and our lawyers and your lawyers feel that there's, a commitment for that ongoing funding, we could potentially begin the reorganization and move in that direction. In terms of the 800K and how far that would get us as far as enhanced monitoring and what would we need in addition to that to fully set up the program, is that what you're asking, if I'm understanding. I think we have an estimated cost per FTE, and we know how many, what the caseload would be. It's an estimate as well. So that what we would need to figure out is, depending on how much money there was, that would drive our capacity and whether there will be enough funding for electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring, I believe I've said, is not something that our court has done before. We would need to set up contracts with VigilNet. We know what the county is paying for those contracts, whether we get those contracts at the same rate, and all of that would need to be explored. And so the full cost of electronic monitoring is something that we would be calculating. So all of those things, as we get a better sense of when we would begin doing this, we would know how much funding is available, and I think we'd be working backwards to say, here's how much monitoring we could do, how many people we could monitor with that amount of funding, how many FTE would cover, and what the caseload, a reasonable caseload would be. Does that make sense? Am I answering your question?
I guess I'm trying to think about it. I'm assuming the courts, I'm coming with the assumption, I'm assuming the courts are taking it on January 1. So if we assume we can reach an agreement, it would be we would need to know by X date what you're going to do in terms of the money, and whether it's ongoing and the contracts that you talked about, so that we could actually start the hiring, the reorganizing, and it's less about us giving you a certain amount of money, but more if we were going to do it, here's what we would need to know by what date, because to me that's foundational. Otherwise, we could just spend all fall talking about how we don't have enough money or we need to lobby the legislature, and we actually don't have something. I'm really concerned we wouldn't have something in place on January 1.
Yeah, that is the work we're doing. There are already conversations happening about the IGA. Our attorneys are already working with the courts on what's needed just to do exactly that, to make sure that we have everything set up in the time that this transition is going to need to happen. One of the things that I have struggled with is why the courts can't focus on the higher level supervision from the start. And because you're we're going to need some time. And I understand, to do the total transition, but to me, from a public safety standpoint, doing that higher level supervision and making sure that we have that covered should be everyone's shared #1 priority.
I'll take a stab at that one. It's a great question. Enhanced monitoring is, the reason we started this proposal to begin with is we wanted to find a way for the county to spend less money yet preserve the ability for monitoring of those higher risk individuals who are released without it turning into an emergency population release situation for the jail and so forth. The challenge, though, is that monitoring the higher risk population is not a primary function of release assistance officers throughout the state. That is done by some jurisdictions, by release assistance officers in some jurisdictions. No jurisdictions are as large as Multnomah County, and we have a very, volatile and high-risk population that needs to be monitored. We are willing to undertake that, to step in that direction and complete that work if we're collecting the data from the outset about everybody who's released, and we would have the ability then to look at outcomes, to step down the total population of individuals who are on the higher level of monitoring if needed, if capacity becomes an issue. In the current structure, we don't have any of that. We don't have any of the data about the individuals who are released initially. That's all collected by the DCJ Recog unit, and it's not even in a software system that we could have access to. So we're not administering the pretrial release order to determine who's released at what risk level. We're not collecting the full criminal history or administering the risk assessment. For us to move in the direction of being able to eventually take on the enhanced monitoring, we feel like we would need to have all of that in place. The software tools that we proposed using, the Oregon Pretrial Assessment Tool, the OPAT, to replace the PSA, as well as the e-supervision software system that most other jurisdictions in Oregon are using to collect pretrial information, we would start using those right from the get-go, and we would be collecting a lot more information. And we feel that that would set us up to be in a position to take over that enhanced monitoring if the county could not do that. But without those other pieces in place, we're not willing to or able to just jump into taking over the enhanced monitoring for the county. We both don't have access to the data, and we don't have the experience in that area to just jump into that and make that commitment without collecting information on the other parts of the system. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm sure we'll discuss it further.
Okay.
I am curious, because we're using high risk in a bunch of different ways here. So with the enhanced monitoring, it's both high risk with public safety because of the type of charge, but also high risk of failure to appear?
Yes. We look at both those risk factors.
Thank you. And then do we know when the OPAT is planned to be released? And part of why we're basing all of our assumptions and numbers on a tool that I've heard very clearly y'all don't like. So if we have a tool that we like and we think it's more predictive, then it could change our assumptions of numbers. Do we know when that's supposed to be out so that you all can, so we can start using that?
Yeah, it should be available for use this summer.
Okay.
They're working out some final contractual details on that. We anticipate that that tool would be ready far before we would be ready to start using it when we make this transition.
I would love for us to start using
that would hang us up.
Okay, yeah, I would love for us to start using it during the transition so we can start to see what that looks like.
If DCJ was able to adopt that tool and start using it prior to the transition to the court, I think that would be an option. They could use that tool, whether, what type of commitment that would take from them to make that transition for an interim period, I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for being, I'm sorry, Commissioner, I was giving the pause, I didn't, okay. Thank you so much for being here, appreciate it. Thank you, Katie. Thank you. All right, so that brings us to the end of both our amendment discussion and the time that we have. So we're gonna, yes. So one second, we're gonna start with budget notes. So everybody has an updated packet of budget notes that have been reviewed by the county attorney. I believe the departments also have access to the budget notes. What I'm going to ask is for our meeting starting tomorrow morning, we're going to dive right into budget notes. So please come prepared with questions, comments, feelings, so that we can really have a productive conversation and use our time well tomorrow, because tomorrow is really our last chance for a public deliberation before we are moving into the Thursday afternoon board meeting where we're voting on the budget. So want to use that time well. I'll open it up to see if any folks have amendments or budget notes that they want to drop right now. Commissioner Moyer.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Singleton went first. She was in line first.
I've got a couple of updates. So I have 2D updated. It's changed some of the staffing structure. This is an eviction prevention group. It's both InReach as well as the folks who can do the paperwork for rent assistance for the current Medicaid waiver, not the SUD waiver that was being discussed. However, it's changed to 3 FTE for that team, specifically to have a point of contact to support Commissioner Moyer's recovery housing model and connect folks with the rent assistance there. I also am just going to hand out the update I already verbalized about the PFA amendment and the changes in dollars. So it's just decreasing the total amount of that budget amendment. I've also updated the countywide 26 amendment. It is immigration legal assistance and mini grants. This is after conversations with the chair and her team. So it's decreasing the dollar amount there to $100,000 total. I also have a new amendment that is funding legal services and supports as well as peer navigators with public defense, and the pay for is a reduction in all of our offices of 10%, as well as, oops, I needed one more, sorry. As well as some of a revenue amendment. I have a amendment with Commissioner Jones-Dixon that is refunding the fair housing testing in East Multnomah County. I have a budget note around the Gateway Center that I want to appreciate the DA's team working with me on to make sure that we're really looking at how services are delivered and looking at best practice to make sure that we come out of the post-COVID world of the Gateway Center into what folks currently need. I have a budget note with Chair Vega Peterson that is about the Sun School system. We've discussed this one at length, and I know we'll discuss all of these more tomorrow. I have a budget note that is a follow-up from last year's, where we did a look at the data and consistency of data in homeless services. The report on that clearly showed that we need more work, and so this is a follow-up to that to bring more alignment in terms like eviction prevention and rapid rehousing, where we continue to have different definitions across our departments. I have another budget note that is homeless response system, doing some work to really assess what is the role of cities, what is the role of the county when it comes to homeless services. It's not just looking at the city of Portland, but looking at the overlap between our other cities in Multnomah County. And then lastly, I have a budget note that would earmark and move into contingency dollars for, from the Homeless Services Department Capital Fund, $1 million to be held over for a new North Portland Day Center, so earmarking that in contingency funds.
All right. I have a budget amendment that moves funds from Program Offer 30400D, supportive housing tenant-based commitments of $275,000 to Program Offer 4007 for A, mental health residential services. This is specifically moving unutilized funds the New Narrative has identified from one of their programs to an unfunded gap in Bridgeview. This is a one-time only stopgap to get them through this year. We desperately need the state of Oregon to allow people with severe persistent mental illness who are permanently disabled, which is this population, this is our highest acuity population, to have access to Medicaid long-term care. Our permanent supported housing system is not designed to meet this level of need. These are individuals who need a fairly high level of staffing that is absolutely Medicaid fundable, and our state partners continue to illegally block their access to the entitlement program that is available to every other type of disability. I don't want to be back here next year filling this hole for the state of Oregon because they are breaking the law. But I cannot allow these 47 residents in my district who are the most acute in our permanent supported housing program to lose their placements. And so this is a one-time fund swap to get through fiscal year 27, but we cannot continue to do this. My second budget amendment is in relationship to the restorative justice budget note. I am moving contingency into contingency. Christian knows what I'm talking about. But it's still in contingency. It's just an earmarked contingency to see if we really can work collaboratively. We are also looking at changing some of the language in partnership with D2 and D4 on the budget note to capture their input as well. So look for that. And then my last one is the language clarification that I talked about earlier related to recovery housing amendment. That's amendment, I don't know. It says 3, but it's not 3 in the 22. Thank you. And this really is to capture our intent to leverage the 1115 health-related social need waiver to the greatest extent possible. And if we, so it sets a total cap of no more than 2.1 million, but the goal is to spend significantly less of that and leverage the 1115. And then that money just is available to the larger pot. And we continue to offer rental assistance out of shelter.
Great. And then I have an updated amendment for 12C. We're removing 2 program offers, and we're going to draw the funding from the remaining 2. It's for the homeless services in East County. And I have a new amendment for Commissioner Moyer. It's for the Justice Fellowship. It's building off of the program that we received an update from Lipsick a few weeks ago, and it's $50,000 for that program to extend the cohort, seeing that the MacArthur grant ends next at the end of this year. So. Yes.
I also have, this is not an amendment or a budget note, but this is for the health department. Yesterday morning, we asked about the 31% cut in program offer 400-84A, culturally specific mental health services, which is cutting a third of it. I would like to get an answer this afternoon because I don't need it right now, but I'd like it to have it this afternoon. This was an email that my policy and budget director sent. So if I could get that, that would be great because I need to know whether I need to take action. Thanks.
Okay, great. I'm seeing head nods from the health department. Thank you. So, so for these budget notes and new budget amendments, we're going to need to work quickly at the department and COO level to get impact statements. So I'm just curious, has anyone had conversations with any of the departments or the COO's office about any of the budget notes, the new budget notes or amendments?
I told them.
Okay.
I have to ask you back.
Okay. Okay. So we'll look. So we'll definitely have make time then tomorrow for discussion about some of the impacts on some of the newest things. So just asking everyone to lean in today to make sure that we're able to be prepared to have those conversations on both the board side and the department side.
Yeah, I think on my, because I retracted some, but I haven't come up with new pay-fors. I mean, they're reused repay-fors, so I'm assuming it's a cut and paste on what the impact is. So, well, I didn't run it by it. It's not like I've come up with something new.
And all departments and COO staff have seen my amendments and budget notes.
Okay. So I just want to put this out there because we do have one last scheduled meeting before Thursday. So we can come back for in the afternoon on Wednesday for a little bit. We have some time constraint, or we have some time limitations tomorrow afternoon because of staff availability. But I think I want people to plan for that. That we will be coming back after lunch on Wednesday to make sure we finished all the discussions that we need to have. All right. Great. Thank you. That concludes our 20th budget work session. There being no further business, we are adjourned.